Yusuf had tended the Vest grounds for 22 years, which meant he had learned to read a house the way other men read weather. He knew the particular quiet that descended when Ronan Vest came home. Not silence exactly, but a holding of breath, a straightening of backs, a careful arrangement of faces. The kitchen staff did not laugh when Ronan was in the house. The housemaids did not linger in the corridors. Even the dogs, two large gray hounds that normally ran the length of the east lawn, found their corners and stayed in them. This was not cruelty on Ronan's part. Yusuf understood that. It was weight, the particular gravity of a man who had spent 30 years making decisions that could not be undone, decisions that other men brought to him because they could not bear to make them themselves. It had settled into his face, into the set of his shoulders, into the way he crossed a room, as though arriving were itself a kind of verdict. People feared him, and they could not have explained precisely why, which was, Yusuf had come to understand, the most efficient kind of fear. Lena Vess had been ill since the autumn. Not gravely, or so it had seemed at first, but persistently. A slow dimming that had taken the brightness from her eyes, and the particular sharp humor from her voice, and had left in its place a woman who slept more than she woke, and woke into a confusion that frightened the staff. Dr. Halden had managed her care for 4 years and spoke about her condition with the smooth, measured confidence of a man who has never once been questioned. He arrived twice weekly, adjusted her medications, and departed. The household arranged itself around his schedule as it arranged itself around everything. Without complaint, the nurse arrived on a Tuesday evening in early spring. Yusuf saw her from the kitchen garden, a small woman in a gray coat, carrying a bag that looked too heavy for her, walking up the gravel drive without anyone having come out to meet her. The housekeeper, Mrs. Farrow, received her at the side door rather than the front, which told Yusuf everything about how the household had categorized her. Night cover, temporary, the kind of help you hired cheaply and did not need to greet properly. Hers name was Marta. He learned it 3 days later when he heard Mrs. Farrow use it in passing, without the title that accompanied Dr. Halden's name in every sentence. Just Marta, the way you said the name of a piece of furniture you were not sure you were going to keep. Ronan Vest did not appear to register her at all. Yusuf watched him pass through the entrance hall on the Wednesday morning, while Marta was coming down the stairs with Lena's breakfast tray, and Ronan's eyes moved over her, the way they moved over the paintings. Present, registered, assigned no particular significance. She stepped to one side to let him pass. He did not slow. Yusuf noticed things. It was what 22 years in a garden taught a person, that the telling detail was almost never the dramatic one. It was the small asymmetry, the thing slightly out of place, the variation in a pattern so established. You had stopped seeing the pattern itself. He noticed, over the first week, that Marta moved through the house quietly, but not meekly. She asked Mrs. Farrow questions about the medication schedule, careful, specific questions, the kind that did not sound like accusations but required precise answers. He noticed that she had begun keeping a small notebook in her coat pocket, and that she wrote in it, not at the nurse's desk in the upstairs corridor, but in the kitchen garden in the early mornings, sitting on the stone bench with her back to the house, as though she wanted no one to read over her shoulder. He did not approach her. That was not his way. But he did not move away either, those mornings, and after the third one she looked up from the notebook and said, without preamble, "The foxgloves are early this year." "They are," he said. "My grandmother grew them," she said, and looked back down at the notebook, and that was all. But Yusuf had been reading silences for 22 years, and that one told him she was not a woman who made small talk. She had spoken because she needed a moment of ordinary human exchange before returning to something that was not ordinary. He went back to his work and let her have the quiet. On the 9th night, Marta did not go to the kitchen garden in the morning. Yusuf noticed her light was still on in the upstairs room, at 6 o'clock when he came through the gate, which meant she had not slept. He did not see her at breakfast, nor in the corridor, nor anywhere in the house. What he saw, at 7:30, was Ronan Vess, standing at the tall window of the breakfast room with an envelope open in his hands. Yusuf was trimming the box hedge along the terrace. He had a clear line of sight through the glass, though he kept his eyes on his work in the way that 22 years had perfected, present, without intruding, visible, without watching. He could not read Ronan's expression from that angle, but he could read the stillness of him, which was different from his ordinary stillness. The ordinary stillness was contained, directed outward, a man awaiting information. This stillness was something older, the kind that comes when information has arrived and the mind has not yet decided what to do with it. Ronan read the contents of the envelope twice. Then he set it on the breakfast table and stood looking at it for a long moment, and then he left the room. Yusuf heard, at 8:30, the particular sound of Dr. Halden's car in the drive. The early arrival that happened sometimes when Ronan summoned him outside the usual schedule. He heard voices in the study, though he could not make out words. The voices did not rise. They did not need to. When Dr. Halden left 20 minutes later, he left without his bag, and he did not look at the house as he went down the steps, and he did not come back. The solicitor arrived at 10. Yusuf recognized the car. By noon, Lena Vess was sitting up in bed for the first time in 6 weeks with clear eyes, and a sharpness about her that made the housemaid, who brought her soup, come downstairs looking slightly unsteady, as though she had opened a door and found a different room than she expected. By 2 o'clock, Marta was in the kitchen garden with her coat on and her bag at her feet. Yusuf understood, without needing to ask, what she was thinking. She had been brought in as overnight cover, temporary, the name that did not get a title. She had found something that the household's own physician had not found, or had not chosen to find, and she had done what a person of plain conscience does with such a thing. She had put it where it could not be ignored. And now, having done that, she believed her position had become untenable. She had accused the man everyone deferred to. She had placed that accusation in the hands of the man everyone feared. The logical conclusion was departure. She was, as Yusuf thought, wrong about one thing. She was wrong about how the feared man read a person who told him an inconvenient truth. He heard the French doors open at the back of the house. Ronan Vess crossed the terrace and came down the steps into the kitchen garden without hurrying, without the particular purposefulness that usually preceded a decision. He walked the way a man walks when the decision is already made, and what comes next is simply the arriving at it. Marta did not look up until he was close, and then she stood, the way staff stood when the principal of a household entered a room. He looked at her bag. He looked at her. She said, "I thought it best," and stopped. He said, "Sit down." It was not a command, exactly. It had the shape of one, but not the temperature. She sat. He sat beside her on the stone bench, which Yusuf had never in 22 years seen Ronan Vess do. Sit on the garden bench, in the open, in the middle of the day, beside a person rather than across from them. Yusuf moved toward the far end of the garden with his shears and kept his hands moving. He could not hear everything that was said. He heard Ronan ask, in a voice quieter than he had ever heard from the man, how long she had known. He heard her answer, 3 nights of discrepancy, then 6, then the pattern clear enough that she was sure. He heard her say she had written it down because she wanted to be certain before she said anything, because she understood whose house this was, and she did not want to say a thing she could not support. He heard Ronan say nothing for a moment. Then he heard him say, "My mother smiled at me this morning for the first time in 4 months." Marta said something Yusuf could not catch. Then Ronan said the word that Yusuf carried with him for the rest of that year, the word that seemed to him to contain everything the feared man was not supposed to be capable of. Not a command, not an arrangement, not a transaction. One word, spoken to a woman in a gray coat sitting on a stone bench in a kitchen garden with her bag at her feet, as direct and as plain as anything Yusuf had ever heard the man say, "Stay." Lena Vess was herself again within the fortnight, sharp, warm, demanding of the crossword and intolerant of overcooked eggs, filling the upstairs corridor with commentary on things that did not concern her, and laughter that the dogs, newly comfortable on the east lawn, seemed to take as permission for their own noise. Dr. Halden did not return. The matter was referred to the appropriate professional body, quietly and completely, through channels that did not require the household to speak of it again. Marta's bag was carried back to the room off the upstairs corridor, not by the housekeeper, by Ronan Vess. Yusuf watched from the garden as the light came on in the room, and the curtain shifted slightly in the way. Curtains shift when a window is opened to let in the spring air, and he thought about 22 years of watching powerful people move through a house, and about the particular education that 22 years in a garden gives a man, that the thing hidden in plain sight is almost always the thing that matters most, and that the rarest thing in a house full of people who want something from a man is the presence of one person who simply tells Him the truth. He went back to his foxgloves. They were early this year.